Hey, I'm Doug. Welcome to Backcountry Pilgrim, a channel devoted to hiking, backpacking, camping, and even the Camino de Santiago. Today I want to talk to you about how I mentally think through my layering clothing system. So when it comes to backpacking and hiking and camping, Camino, pretty much anything you do outside for an extended period of time, layering your clothing becomes very important. If you're just running from your house to your car and your car to the office or something like that, layering is not terribly important. And the reason is you're probably not going to be stuck in whatever weather is outside for very long. You're basically moving from one dry, climate-controlled place to another. Now, if you're in a house to the car to the office kind of situation, and you look outside and it's raining, you might just grab some big warm raincoat. And once you get outside, if it turns out that this coat's actually quite a bit too warm for these conditions, it doesn't really matter because you're not going to be in those conditions for very long. However, if you're hiking outside, having a big burly coat is probably going to make you very uncomfortable very quickly. It's kind of all or nothing. You take the coat off, you're probably freezing, you put it back on, you're too hot. That is not a good situation to be in when you're hiking. And the same goes with most of your clothing. If you put on some big old heavy wool socks and you get out there and it's a 70-degree day, there's a good chance that those wool socks are going to make you extremely uncomfortable. And it's not just about comfort. If you sweat out your clothes, several things can happen. Number one, the wind kicks up, you could get hypothermic in a situation where you're actually feeling fairly hot. If you've got big heavy socks on, they might feel nice comfort-wise, but later as your feet heat up, you could be looking at debilitating levels of blisters or other problems, all because your socks are too hot. So basically, clothing layering is a system by which you gradually increase the layers on your body. Instead of just trying to bring one thing that's hot and one thing that's cold, you bring layers that you can have more fine control over so that whatever the temperature, rain, wind, sun situation is, you have a combination that you can put on that's going to get you pretty close to what will be comfortable. Now, a lot of people speak in terms of base layer, mid layer, shell layer. I think that sometimes that can become confusing because to me, like a base layer sounds like the very first thing you put on. And yet often underwear is not considered a base layer. Or sometimes a layer that is really just there to keep you a little bit warmer than normal might be your second layer. Well, now where's the mid layer? Is it a mid layer or is it now a shell? I personally like to think more in terms of function rather than location. First of all, I think of a coverage layer. This is basically the layer that makes you not be naked. Now, the coverage layer is also kind of your first layer of protection against exposure to the elements. And the elements can include anything from snow and rain and wind to just sun or plants. Personally, I live in an area that has a lot of poison oak in the hills. So when I go out, unless I am absolutely certain I am not going to run into that stuff, I always make sure that I can at least achieve full coverage even if it's warm. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to keep it on, doesn't mean I'm not going to roll the sleeves up, doesn't mean I'm not going to zip the bottom of the pants off if I have my convertibles on. It just means that I am able to attain full coverage if I need it. Now, the coverage layer in many situations, especially when you're hiking, needs to be pretty thin. We're not going for warmth at this layer. And that's because hiking generates heat. I don't care how cold it is outside, your body is going to generate heat when you hike. And you might be surprised at just how cold it can get outside before you achieve kind of an equilibrium between the heat your body is putting out and how cold it is outside. So you don't want your coverage layer to be too warm, because if you get too warm, what are you going to do? The whole point of the layering system is to make sure that you have versatility, that you can change it up. So the coverage layer, I typically go for very thin. Thin shirt, thin pants, thin socks. The insulation layer is your first layer where you're trying to actually get warmed up. So this might be long underwear or a pair of tights under a pair of shorts, a vest, a puffy jacket, maybe a wool sweater, something that is designed to increase your heat. Now, on a lot of hikes, you may never need or want that insulation layer. However, when you get to where you're hiking, that's often where the insulation layer becomes very important, because once you stop, that body heat stops being produced at the same rate, and suddenly you can get very chilly. And then the third category of layers that I think of is basically your waterproof layer, your rain suit. This is what is designed to keep rain and snow from saturating your clothing and creating an air conditioning type situation that is going to lead to hypothermia. Being wet is not really that much of a problem. I mean, people who dive in extremely cold conditions put on a wet suit. Why is it called a wetsuit? Because you get wet in it. The purpose of a wetsuit is not to keep you dry, it's to keep the heat that has been collected in the moisture next to your body, instead of bleeding off, being replaced by more cold ocean or lake water and sucking your heat out. In just about every kind of condition, if you're hiking, you're going to be somewhat wet. Either because of water or sweat, you're gonna be wet. And again, that's not necessarily a problem so long as there isn't wind or rain or snow continually leaching the heat away from your body. Now, if all you're doing is standing in the rain or walking from your house to your car or your car to your office, yes, that layer should also keep you dry. However, on a hike, the point is not to just be bone dry at the end of a hike. That's not gonna happen even if it's not raining. The point of the waterproof layer is to make sure that you are not freezing to death because you're continually resaturating your clothing with cold water. Now, there are other potential layers, there's other kinds of gear, gaiter, gloves, buff, hats, waterproof socks, boots or shoes, but I think that those three are pretty basic. They're the three layers that you really should be prepared to put on, even if you're just going on a long day hike. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If it has, would you mind giving it a like? And if you have not subscribed to the channel, go for it. Backcountry Pilgrim is all about hiking, camping, backpacking, and the Camino de Santiago. So if you are into those things, give it a subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Now, I will spare you the underwear and socks alone shot.